Last check of our forecast today, temperatures hovering right around 60 degrees. Keep in mind, southwestern counties, you could see some light rain this afternoon through this evening. Drier weather tonight for everyone. Tomorrow, 56, as well as on Thursday. So we're repeating tomorrow and Thursday, upper 50s. For Halloween, 55 degrees with dry skies expected. And then we head on into the weekend with highs in the low 50s, a little bit cooler. Dry on Saturday, a little bit of rain possible Sunday into Monday. And Monday of next week, we start off with the upper 50s. So a long stretch of fall-like weather is in front of us. Keep in mind, too, today, if you are going to be out and about, it could be a little bit gusty at times, to 20 to 25 mile per hour wind gusts.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. And that's all for Fox 32 News at noon.
News continues next on Chicago Live with Tia. Have a great one.
Next. One of the stories making national headlines. Of course, at this point, you probably have seen it, maybe heard about it. Really some bombshell details that played out in federal court today. This all involves the U.S. Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino. And we do know that the judge basically told Bovino that he will have to check in every day, Monday through Friday, on exactly what unfolds in Chicago in terms of ICE being here on the ground. And for a report and an update on this, we want to go to Anita Blanton. We know she was inside that courtroom and got a chance to hear everything that was unfolding. Anita, can you hear me? And can you walk me through what unfolded in court today? All right, we're going to try to get to Anita, but let me just walk you through some of what we've learned happened in court today. So this was all in federal court. Of course, you know, Bovino is accused of violating a judge's previous order by using tear gas during immigration operations. And the judge that was hearing and presiding over what unfolded today was Judge Sarah Ellis. A very interesting background on Ellis herself. She was born in Canada. She was nominated by Barack Obama, her parents from Jamaica. And in court today, she made it very clear, reprimanded Bovino for incidents that unfolded in Little Village and also Old Irving Park, demanding body cam footage, reports, and also daily updates every single day. So Bovino will have to check in with the judge on this. That is some of what unfolded. The court hearing began right after 11:30, and that is when shortly after that, we know Bovino was in court, and he actually requested, his attorneys requested that the judge modify that temporary restraining order on the basis that tear gas is used to allow federal agents to leave highly volatile situations, so more lethal force isn't used, it doesn't occur. And so the judge quickly denied that request to alter that TRO, which was already in place, expecting now the daily reports from Bovino to create more accountability. So the judge said no to modifying that restraining order and instead put restrictions on Bovino to check in on a daily basis. We are trying to work on getting Anita Blanton. She was inside that courtroom when all of this transpired. She was giving us updates on exactly what happened. Really, the big question here is really, you know, what we're hearing is happening on the streets versus what's in the reports and versus what the body cam footage shows. And so the judge wants to have that documentation in hand every day, Monday through Friday, to see, you know, if the truth is being told here, because we have heard from residents, you know, even in the case of where the woman was shot 5 times by ICE agents, we saw what was put in that press release by the federal government. And then we also heard, you know, once that attorney representing the woman, Miramar Martinez, was in court, said that there was a difference of, you know, what was put to black and white versus what the body camera video showed. So very interesting details came out in court today. Again, let's go to Anita Blanton. She was in court for most of the day to give us an update. Anita, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
We hear you just fine. Walk us through what transpired inside that courtroom.
Well, so I kind of have been saying that I feel like the judge eased into the hard-hitting aspects of what she had to say. She started by kind of saying, all right, 3 things may have happened here to get us here today. One of those would be the fact that I set this TRO up October 9th initially, and that maybe, you know, people didn't understand her order, which, of course, this is now the 3rd time they have come into her courtroom regarding this particular case. So she's really trying to get some clarification on what's going on on? What's going wrong here? But so that initial order, she said maybe people didn't understand it. I'm going to be a little bit more clear today. The second thing would be that, all right, maybe no one even read it. I mean, that's kind of an insult, but at the same time, it's possible. Think about how many emails we get a day. Do you read every single one line by line? So maybe no one read it. She said the third thing she's really, really hoping didn't happen is that everyone read it, everyone understood it, and yet they decided to act in their own manner anyhow. So she says to avoid that being a possibility, she's going to go back to number one, and that is to make sure that everyone fully, clearly understands her expectations when it comes to this TRO. Again, initially they were in court on October 9th for this. That was from the instances that had taken place at Broadview. By a week later, they were back in court. She expanded the order to include body cameras, that she wanted all of the agents working under Operation Midway Blitz to have body cameras on. That came under the situation that happened in Southeast Chicago, where they had a chase and then the pit maneuver in the neighborhood, and then the people came out of their homes to see what was going on. And the agent said that they were being pelted with rocks and with eggs, and so they deployed tear gas in the area. But she also said in that expanded order that if tear gas is going to be used, you have to give warnings. And she said that's another aspect of things that she doesn't believe people have been, people meaning agents, have been following. That when I say give a warning, that means that initially I say, okay, back up. All right. If no one understands that, no one complies with that, I give time to see if anyone's going to follow that order. Then you come back and you say what exactly you're about to do next. And after you say what you're going to do next, which is deploying the tear gas, then you deploy the tear gas, not just back up and then you go ahead and use the tear gas, because then people don't really have a reasonable amount of time, she says, to get out of the way. And one of the areas I think that she maybe hit on the longest and most passionately was the old Irving Park situation that took place over the weekend. We saw those videos where the agents came into that area. Now, they say that as a result of the operation that took place in Old Irving Park, that one man was arrested who was in the country illegally. But there were also several U.S. citizens who were arrested or who were detained during that situation. And the biggest aspect of it all was that there were children there. They were getting ready for a pre-Halloween celebration, and she did not like that situation at all. She says that for those who are sworn to serve and protect, that the children should be able to see you as a means of safety, and that their sense of safety was eroded on that day. So she took a lot of time to talk about that situation in Old Irving Park especially. But of course, the reason why we ended up back here for a third time on this particular case was one of the situations that took place in Little Village, where you could clearly see Commander Gregory Bavino tossing a canister out into the crowd. Now, he says he was being pelted with rocks. That's why he deployed the tear gas in that area, or a chemical irritant into that area. And he says that this is among the least lethal and the least impactful ways of dispersing a crowd if they choose to use tear gas. But the judge today said no. First and foremost, I told everybody to wear body cameras. Where was the body camera footage? If you say a rock hit you, the camera is actually your friend, because it would show that a rock hit you, and that's why you resulted to the means that you did. But there are no footage. There is no footage of a rock hitting Gregory Bavino. There's only the image of him throwing it out. So maybe he was pelted with a rock, but there's just no footage to show that. There are no videos to show that. So she's saying make sure that everyone has on body cameras, and that would prevent some of the he said, she said that's been happening as a part of Operation Midway Blitz. She went on to ask how many agents have body cameras. How many agents are in our area? He said about 201. Okay, does everyone have body cameras? Not everyone. Now, they were ordered to all have them, but he says not everyone. So she says, why doesn't everyone have one by now? She says it really depends, or Bavino says it really depends on where they were coming from, because the agents come from all over the country for this operation, or the training that they've had. The training is about 4 hours. So she's asking, the judge is asking some questions about this training for the body cameras. And she says, well, do you have a body camera? No. So you're the commanding officer of this operation, and you don't have a body camera after my TRO. So that was a point of contention as well. So 3 things that come out of this hearing that we had here today. First and foremost will be that she has ordered Commander Gregory Bavino to be in her presence every day, starting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Now, it's going to be sealed. We won't see it, but they are to meet every day in person because, of course, you would immediately think every day, maybe that's going to be on Zoom or something. No, every day in person at 6 p.m. The Judge Sarah Ellis, and Commander Gregory Bavino are set to meet. The second thing that she is requiring after this is that all camera footage from September 2nd, dating back to September 2nd, all the way up through now, be delivered to her by Friday. Now, it's maybe 11:13 when Gregory Bavino was dismissed from the courtroom, but after he left, the attorneys still stayed back, and that was one of the points that they fought after that, which was, how are we supposed to get all of this footage to you? Because there are some agents who have body cameras, remember that. How are we supposed to get all of this to you by Friday? And she says, well, if there's 500 videos and you can't get them to me by Friday, then come back to me and tell me that. But if not, I think that, and she went over like, okay, well, how long does it take for you to finalize a report? When should you be able to turn it over? Okay, so if I dated it back to September 2nd, there should be some things that you can readily turn over to me right now. Go ahead and turn those in by Friday. And moving forward in this operation, she says that she wants all use of force reports to be delivered to her within 24 hours of them being finalized. And the third thing would be that all of the agents have conspicuous identification, meaning it is blatant, it is bold, conspicuous identification on multiple parts of their uniform. And that was a part that they kind of went back and forth on as well, because he said, well, Gregory Bavino said, okay, well, if you just say, put it on their chest, but they have to put extra gear on that day for a specific operation, maybe then it gets covered up, maybe then someone says it's a violation. Okay, so multiple parts of their uniform, whatever uniform they're wearing, they need to be seen. Of course, there's been a lot of question for people. It's a little confusing. It gets a little confusing when you see agents come out and you're thinking, like, is this ICE? In fact, as Gregory Bavino was exiting today, people were saying, ICE out, ICE out. He's actually the commander of Customs and Border Patrol. That's a very different agency. So it does get a little confusing as to who's doing what and whose rules of engagement are what. So she wanted it to be very clear, multiple points on the body as to who you are in the operation that's taking place. So 3 things that she said could have taken place. She wanted to make it very clear. And then 3 things that she says will take place moving forward. The attorneys argued on a couple of those things, but she really was not budging on much. She said, if I give you more time to turn over these things to me, that means we are delaying the preliminary injunction. That's supposed to be on November 5th. And of course, I don't think anyone in there actually wanted to delay the preliminary injunction, because that TRO would still then be in place for another week if they delayed the preliminary injunction. Again, that's set for November 5th. So there's plenty to happen between starting tomorrow on to November 5th, but we'll see how much goes forward. I will tell you this. She kind of ended on a note by saying a few things that I want to just turn over to you here. She said in her notes to them, as she was speaking to them, she said, listen, I think he understands where I'm coming from and what his obligations are as the commander and what his agents are and are not allowed to do, and the importance of documentation. I suspect we will see change. He'll be here every day at 6 to tell me what happened, not modifying the TRO from here. She said she is not modifying it from here. I expect everyone to act in good faith. I don't jump to conclusions. I don't need to do things that I don't need to do. I know my lane and I will stay in it, but I'm also not afraid to enforce this TRO. I won't tie their hands, but I am going to expect that they know and understand their responsibility in terms of use of force. And if they use tear gas, they better be able to back it up to you.
Ask you one more question, Anita, because I know several questions have come up, especially from journalists that have been out there trying to do their job, saying that in some cases ICE has impeded on their ability to be journalists. Did the judge address journalists in any way or talk about how journalists should be treated when they are on these scenes when ICE is also present?
Sure. If you take this back to October 9th, remember, this case was initially brought by a group of journalists and protesters, those representing protesters as well. And it really started as a result of what's been taking place at Broadview, at the ICE Processing Center. You know, every Friday since the beginning of September, we've gone out there, we've seen what's been happening as the protests have grown. The fence that went up then was coming down as a result of a legal ruling as well. All of the things that have been happening, the tear gas that was repeatedly deployed there, the pellets that were used against the protesters in that area, and the protesters kind of getting more antsy in terms of they split into two groups. One group went over onto 25th Street, started to block the way for the ICE officers to get in and out of that facility. But remember, that's the ICE Processing Center. There are ICE agents there, federal agents there, but we're dealing with Customs and Border Patrol here when it comes to Gregory Bovino. So yes, this initial case was brought on behalf of journalists and also the protesters who were out at the Broadview ICE Processing Center, but it's kind of broadened out quite a bit more since then. And so in her ruling today, and her words today to Gregory Bovino, she said, hey, if a journalist clearly identified, was going back into the same thing that she said about the agents, journalists who are credentialed media or people who are documenting the protests who are clearly identifiable, because of course at this point in time somebody may be doing like a podcast or something like that. Maybe they're not credentialed media, but someone who is clearly identifiable as someone who is documenting what's taking place with these protests, they should not be getting tear gassed either. They should not be getting rubber pellets either. And she again went back into that aspect of the fact that a lot of times what they're doing in this area, even if you aim tear gas this way, people on this side still get a bit of that tear gas. So journalists were having the effects of it. Even some of our teammates were having the effects of the tear gas as well. And there were a couple of vehicles, news vehicles, that were hit with the rubber pellets. So yes, this did cover journalists as well as the protesters as well.
All right. Well, Anita Blanton, we appreciate your reporting on this. And of course, we have much more for anyone that is watching right now, located right on our website, fox32chicago.com. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back a little later in the show to continue coverage on this very issue of Greg Bovino, we are going to have former FBI agent Ross Rice here talking about, you know, what it means for a federal official of this magnitude to now have to go to court every day, Monday through Friday. Is this record breaking? Has anything like this in history ever happened before? We're going to have that coming up later in the show, and we'll have much more right after this short break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. Okay, it is very apparent that we love dinosaurs, fossils, all things like that. Paleontology on this show. And joining us today, we have Dr. Carrie Woodruff, a paleontologist at the Philip and Patricia Frost Museum of Science. This time around, a new dome-headed dinosaur species was discovered in Montana, and a study was released on it this month, talking all about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Woodruff.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let's talk about this discovery. It was discovered in Montana. Was this something that, paleontologists were on the lookout for? Did they know this existed?
No, so when we find dinosaurs, the rock levels we find them in, we call them formations. And so a lot of the formations around this area had these groups of, this group of dome-headed dinosaurs. But, there had never been a type of dome-headed dinosaur found in that formation before. But there were similar other kinds of dinosaurs between them. So we had meat-eating dinosaurs, we had other plant-eating dinosaurs, but not one of these. So, it was always kind of a weird thing. Why not? So it's great to actually finally fill in this missing spot.
I know, Dr. Woodruff, you are one of the authors of this study. What can you tell by just looking at this dinosaur? What have you learned so far about the existence of this dinosaur? How old is it?
So the fossils are plus or minus, we're looking at like 79 million years, 76, 79 million years, give or take. But what's really interesting is, so the other formations around it, so literally if you went an hour east, you'd be in areas with dinosaurs where you do find these dome-headed dinosaurs. But they're domed, so these dinosaurs walk on two legs, but they basically have on top of their head a little bowling ball. But all of these other ones, the dome of their head is about maybe the size of an orange. But this one is, we call it Brontotholus, is so much bigger. So it's about the size of a cantaloupe. And in fact, it's one of the biggest in North America. So that's really cool that not only do we have this formation, that now we have the first pachycephalosaur, that's these groups of dome-headed dinosaurs, but also we have one of the largest ones in North America.
When we talk about, you said the head is the size of a cantaloupe. When we talk about how heavy this dome-headed dinosaur was at the time, is there any indication to tell, how big it was in terms of weight? What would it eat on a regular basis?
Ooh, those are good questions. So this group of dinosaurs, normally what we find is literally just that bowling ball mass on top of their head. And it's not actually the whole head. Like imagine I was wearing a baseball cap and I just took the hat off, right? We have the hat, so to speak, for these dinosaurs. It's hard to tell because the fossil is during fossilization, it becomes so much heavier than the bone itself. And this whole group of dinosaurs, the body, so the rest of the head, the neck, the whole, everything else afterwards, is pretty darn rare. We don't have a lot. So we estimate this dinosaur would have been maybe about 12 feet long or so, but it had a pretty long tail. So it was still especially for today, like a lot bigger than a deer. So, bigger than most animals walking around that we would normally see.
Perfect. Okay. So in terms of what happens next, is there a situation where this dinosaur, the fossils of this dinosaur are now put into a model, so then it's put together so we can see what it actually looked like when it existed?
Maybe not a model per se, but I mean, it has been fun. That is one of the neat things of a paleontologist. So we make these discoveries, and already I've seen a bunch of people online, just artists who have made their own life renderings to show what the animal, what they think would have looked like when it was alive. So that's pretty cool. Scientifically for us next steps, it will be great as other paleontologists go back to the same area. Do they find more of it? And maybe not just more domes, maybe we find, more of the rest of the skeleton. So, that's what I'm hopeful for is, with more exploration, we'll find more of these missing pieces, if you will, that will really help us understand what this whole animal actually looked like.
Do you, it seems like as of lately, we're hearing more and more about these discoveries, at least in the mainstream, for those of us who maybe, are fans of paleontology, but we're not paleontologists. Why do you think it is that so more frequently now we're hearing about these discoveries?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of for two reasons. So one, especially in the United States, we have so many more paleontologists today than like when I was a student starting out. So, when you have more people walking around looking for something, the more often you're going to find something, right? So every summer we make brand new discoveries, which is great. But also like this dinosaur, some of these fossils of this new dinosaur, and we have 5 individuals. So some of them were found in 1985, but they weren't really recognized as maybe being a new kind of dinosaur. So as well, with new technologies, just even new people asking questions, we will continue to actually make new discoveries from things that had been sitting in museums for decades. So that's actually a really cool thing, because when I go to museums, yeah, we can look at a new fossil that a crew found, but we also have a chance of making a new discovery from something that's literally just been sitting on a shelf.
You said that there are 5, it sounds like 5 varieties of this type of dinosaur. Hopefully I heard you right there. Is that what you said? I want to make sure I'm clear on that before my next question.
So there are 5 individuals. So we have 5 of those bowling ball domes.
Got it. Okay. With that being said, when you made this discovery, were there 5 in a row? You said one was discovered in 1985. How can you identify that they're all, from the same family?
Oh, that's a good question. So 2 of the specimens together were found in 1985, and others were, subsequent years. But there are basically attributes. So that bowling ball bit of dome actually has these spots along the sides of them where all of these other bones would attach. So almost imagine like bone Velcro in a way. And there are all these little ridges and troughs where these other bones would have attached. And so in this group of dinosaurs, we know that basically the size and shape of those other bones, and you can almost see, kind of like puzzle pieces, you can almost see like where they would go. So the height, the length, the width, even basically all of those interdigitations for how the bones attach are different between all of these different species of these dome-headed dinosaurs. So those were altogether the different attributes. So we had a lot of features, even though we just have the dome, right? There's a lot of features on those domes. Think of it like a fingerprint, right? We have a lot of features that let us say, oh, these 5 individuals are all of the same kind of dinosaur, this new kind, and these features are not like any others that we've found previously.
Got it. Okay. Here's my final question, and it may be a little off the cuff. Okay. So roll with the punches on this one, Dr. Woodruff. I saw an image of, what this would have looked like millions and millions of years ago. And my first thought was, how in the heck did the folks that did the alien movies know that there would be something out there that kind of looked like an alien? Is that crazy? Is that happenstance? Or am I completely wrong about that?
Both the xenomorph and aliens and this dinosaur walked on 2 legs. They have a long tail. This thing, our dinosaur is literally, imagine a bowling ball on top of its head. The xenomorphs in the Alien franchise have like this weird, it's really cool, but like this really elongate, frilly looking head. So, I don't think they would mistake one another. But it is neat. Like, a lot of movie monsters and aliens, as well in those movies. A lot of these Hollywood folks get inspiration from, if you're making up an animal, a good place to start is an animal that is alive or was alive. So, if one of these dinosaurs subsequently, really, inspires a future movie monster, and not talking about Jurassic Park, but like something made up, like, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, Dr. Carrie Woodruff, it has been a pleasure talking all things paleontology with you. Really appreciate you joining us here in Chicago on Chicago Live. Thank you so much for your time. And let us know what you research and uncover next so we can have you back on. We appreciate your time.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Coming up, we're going to talk about something. If you are watching and you live in or around Cook County, you've heard no doubt about the property taxes being through the roof. Some people have even gone as far as to say, listen, that is why I moved across the border over to neighboring Northwest Indiana, because of the tax, some people say, problem here in Cook County. We're going to talk to the Deputy Bureau Chief of Cook County about this relief fund that is now in place. Maybe you qualify for it. We'll have much more about it right after this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. It is 1:32 on your Tuesday afternoon, and maybe you are in the number of people that have been impacted really hard by property taxes in the Cook County area. You want to get your pen and paper ready so you can write down a website. There is help out there. It's a one-time allotment of assistance that is available. The deadline is quickly approaching. We're talking about Halloween. This deadline is coming, which is this Friday. We want to bring in the Deputy Bureau Chief, Dom Tachi, I should say, to talk about this. Sorry about that, Dom. Even you're laughing. But yeah, Dom Tachi to talk about this relief assistance program that is available for people. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Talk about who can qualify for this $1,000 of assistance.
Sure. Thank you, Tia. It's great to be here and have a chance to talk about the Cook County Homeowner Relief Fund. It's a $15 million program that will assist Cook County homeowners who've experienced a substantial increase in their property taxes, like you described. And it'll provide that one-time payment of $1,000 you mentioned. And there's really three key eligibility points that I want to hit on. The first is you need to have experienced a property tax increase of at least 30% in either tax year 2021, 2022, or 23. So any of those three tax years. And second, you need to have a household income that is at or below the area median income, and that varies by household size. So if you're a single household, that's $84,000 is the income threshold. For a family of four, it's just under $120,000. And then the third main criteria is you need to occupy the home as your primary residence.
Dom, we reported when the applications first opened for this. Do you know how many applications you've received so far? And if you do receive, let's just say you received 10,000 applications, how do you go through and decide who is then eligible?
Sure. It really is keyed off those criteria I just went through, whether or not you had that qualifying increase, and then whether you meet the income criteria. And so right now, the program has enough funding to help around 14,000 households. And at the moment, we're looking like we'll be able to help every eligible applicant who applies. That'll depend, ultimately on the volume that we get by this Friday. So we want to encourage everyone to come on out and apply. And when you do apply, that first initial application is a really simple 5-10 minute application. Just requires you to put in some basic information about yourself and your property. You have to do a self-reported income submission just to check whether you're eligible. But really, then if you make it, if you're selected for the second phase, that's when you would need to provide some documentation. So you need to upload your ID, take a selfie, upload your income documentation at that point. And that's where that kind of final verification will take place.
Dom, I know we're talking about the Homeowner Relief Fund particularly, but there's also a Catalyst grant, and that application expires on the exact same day, October 31st. That one is geared towards businesses. Tell us about that and how it works.
Sure. I can speak a little bit to it. I don't know the details, but we'd be happy to share a little more. But at its core, this is helping businesses that, and it's $100,000 grant, so actually pretty significant amount of funding available. But the businesses do have to have a certain amount of revenue. I don't know that number precisely, so I don't want to.
A little more than $500,000. A little more than $500,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Tia.
No problem.
But like you said, yeah, that's a great program that the county is launching, open till this Friday as well. And we encourage businesses that kind of meet that minimum kind of revenue to check out the Catalyst grant and apply.
Dom, we've heard from residents in Cook County. Wow, I can't even go back and tell you the exact date, but it's been a while that we've been hearing from residents, particularly really in the south suburbs, definitely complaining about the hike, rightfully so in a lot of cases. I know this is temporary relief. Has there been any discussion beyond the county level, maybe that you can address, to really try to figure out how to make sure, because we're talking about in some cases seniors that would own their home outright. Maybe they qualify for some exemptions, but still at the rate that the taxes are going up, it is forcing them out of their homes. Has there been any conversation about what relief could look like in the future?
Sure. No, I appreciate that question, Tia. And I think what you're spotlighting is what led us to this program. It's kind of starting back last year. The County Board of Commissioners had a hearing looking at the pretty significant increases that have happened over the last few years. And that led to this program, which, as you said, we recognize is kind of one element of relief, but it really is a broader, more systemic issue. And so the county does have a property tax reform group that's been hard at work, including a number of the stakeholders across the county that work on the property tax system, and hoping to bring some reform in partnership with the state as needed. So there's a lot of work going on that front. We know that's ultimately the solution that's needed, but with the Cook County Homeowner Relief Fund, this program, we're trying to offer some relief to folks who've experienced some of those substantial increases.
On a county level, what are you hearing from residents? What are they saying about, having issues with their property taxes and being able to foot the bill?
Yeah. I think you started to capture some of it, right? It's folks that are on a fixed income who are seeing their property taxes increase and wanting to be able to stay in their home. and that's what we're hoping that this program can offer some measure of relief. We know the average tax bill increases that we're trying to address here have been in the kind of $1,000 to $2,000 range, and so with this provision of $1,000 of assistance, we think it goes a good part of the way to helping folks who are had to kind of step up and find a way to meet those higher tax bills in the past few years.
This eligibility, again, the deadline for it is coming up really quickly, October 31st. Has there been any conversation about, I know we were talking about, on the state level, I know this is a relief fund that is available now, but beyond the 14,000 households after this, has there been any conversation on the county level about maybe getting more funds to be able to go to this exact issue?
Sure. At this point, the board approved this funding for, in this year's budget for this round of the Cook County Homeowner Relief Fund. We clearly want to see how this program goes and kind of take it from there, but we're really focusing more on that property tax relief reform group that I mentioned and thinking about the long-term changes that are needed, because I think that's where we'll get kind of the true solutions we need.
All right, Dom Tachi, the Deputy Bureau Chief with Cook County. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for your help delving into this issue. We know there's a lot of people out there that need help. And again, you are with the county's Bureau of Economic Development. Thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Tia, and appreciate you having us on, and want to encourage everyone to check out the website. It's hrf.cookcountyil.gov, and that's where you can apply by this Friday. And thanks again for having me on.
Oh, no problem at all. And if you have your pen and paper ready, maybe we set that too fast. We want to give it to you one more time. The website, hrf.cookcountyil.gov. All right, we have much more coming up here on Chicago Live. We are rolling through almost at the 2 o'clock hour. We're going to talk about some other issues going on in and around our community. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Chicago Live, 1:43 on your Tuesday afternoon. We've been talking about looking across the country and SNAP benefits really being on the line here. We know there are government workers, some of which are not being paid, and everyday expenses are just expensive, right? You can't ignore it. And then we talk about the rising costs of food. It's been really hard times out there for a lot of people, me included, trying to budget all of these really expensive things now. And so there is a food pantry out there that is there and designed to help people. It's called the West Suburban Community Pantry. They help resource challenged families in DuPage and Will County. And sadly, they're having an issue with families showing up to receive the assistance. Well, we want to bring in Maven Sipes, the CEO of the West Suburban Community Pantry. Maven, thank you so much for your time today. Tell us what's the issue, because we know the need is there. So why aren't people feeling comfortable enough to show up?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So we have had families that come to us and tell us that they're worried about leaving their homes. They're not sure they can get to the pantry. And we don't want to hear that. We want people to have access to the nutritious groceries that they need. And so it's important that we can remove those barriers. And so we're figuring out ways that we can do home delivery and get the food to them if they're not able to leave.
Is this an issue with ICE and, the federal government being in the communities is why some families are feeling the concern of not wanting to leave their homes and not wanting to risk, leaving just for a short trip and the fear that they may not be returning back to that home?
Yes, that is it. That is what we're hearing from our families. We just don't know. The fear and of the presence is real in our communities, that we don't know if ICE is going to show up and what they might do. And so it's preventing people from wanting to leave and even to go to places where they normally felt safe, like schools or grocery stores or food pantries if they need to.
Tell me this. So before all of this activity on the ground that we've definitely reported on here on Fox 32 started to transpire, how many families would be showing up maybe on a weekly or monthly basis versus how many families are showing up now?
So it's hard to say week to week the differences with our numbers. We are currently serving about 1,000 families a week. What we're realizing, though, is what we call our no-show rate. People will make appointments or pick up orders and then don't come. That's increased from about an average of 15% to almost up to 20%. So people might be wanting to come out and then something is preventing them, or they decide, it's not worth the risk and they decide not to come out.
Well, that brings up a lot of questions in my mind, because if you don't have the money to get groceries, if you don't have those SNAP benefits that we know are in jeopardy come November, how will you eat? Have you thought about, or is there something in the works right now where you're making delivery options available for people?
Yeah, so we're definitely worried about November and seeing that there's going to be an uptick in need. About 1 in 4 of the households we serve are currently receiving SNAP benefits, so they could be negatively impacted if no benefits are paid out in September. Fortunately, we have a partnership with DoorDash that we've been using for deliveries for families that aren't able to make it to the pantry. And we're going to be adding more of those options, more delivery options for neighbors to place an online order with us and get that home delivery, because we know that more people will be in need come November 1st.
Maven, November 1st is right around the corner, but prior to that, we've done our fair share of reporting. You go to the grocery store, you're getting hit there, really hit right over the head with some of those prices. You pay taxes. If you're a taxpayer, you're getting slammed there. If you have health insurance, you're getting slammed there. It seems like everywhere we turn, that dollar just doesn't stretch as far as it used to anymore. With that being said, have you seen an increase even before we started talking about SNAP, even before we started talking about, the federal government being on the ground, doing immigration enforcement? Did you already see an increase of families needing your help? And what kind of stories have you heard from those families that may have needed your help?
Yeah, we did. This past year, we saw a 15% increase in visits from the year prior, and we're still seeing double the families we were prior to COVID. So the need increased and hasn't been able to go back down because families just can't stretch their budgets far enough. Like you said, everything is more expensive and income is not keeping up. Especially we've got seniors that are on fixed income or receiving Social Security, and it's not enough to pay their bills. And now they're really worried about insurance premiums increasing, and they've got medical expenses expenses and what are we going to do? So we hear from families that they're scared, that they're not sure what they can do. And we just want to make sure that they know they can come to us. There's lots of resources available. We also try to help connect families with resources outside of food if they need referrals for other things, assistance with utilities, perhaps clothing referrals, furniture. We want to try to serve other needs because everything is expensive and budgets only go so far.
I know the West Suburban Community Pantry, I'm reading this right here, has been in the community for more than 30 years. You serve DuPage and Will counties, but like you said, that support goes beyond just food. I see financial assistance and a variety of free programming for both adults and children. Where can people go? If they're watching right now, maybe they've never been in a position like this before, where they are strained beyond belief when it comes to what resources they have available. Where can they go to learn more about what you have to offer?
Well, first I would say go to our website. Our website is wscpantry.org. You can get information on how to get resources from us, but you can also look online and find a local pantry near you. We're out in Woodridge, but if you're in a different location, there are many pantries. You can either go to the website of Northern Illinois Food Bank or Greater Chicago Food Depository, put in your zip code, and find a pantry that's near you that might be able to find resources that you need. There is no shame in asking for help. That's what we constantly try to tell our families. Do not be ashamed asking for help, and pantries are there to serve you. We are welcoming. We have wonderful volunteers and staff that will help you with what you need. And also there's great food available. 44% of what we distributed last year was fresh produce. It's not just a bag of canned goods you're going to get. You're going to get the groceries that you and your family need.
I think what you said there is really important. Don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, because we are seeing people that maybe traditionally didn't get into those food pantry lines, but are forced to because of everything that is going on across our country right now. Maven Sipes, CEO of the West Suburban Community Pantry, thank you for the work that you do in the community, and we appreciate you taking time out to let somebody know, hey, don't be ashamed. Maybe you do need help, and letting them know what some of those resources are. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll have you back on talking about something a little more positive. Maybe there's something more positive than this growing need. Maybe there will be something different that we can talk about next time. But unfortunately, this is these are the circumstances right now that can't be ignored. All right, thanks so much, Maven, and thank you so much for watching us here on Chicago Live. We aren't done. We have an entire hour of more content that we're going to bring your way. Stay with us. A really quick break here, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Chicago Live. If you are a fan of the MLB, you already know about that epic game. Went to 18 innings. The Dodgers and Blue Jays, they are back at it tonight. Pre-game is at 6. Game starts at 7 right here on Fox 32 Chicago. Well, something you probably didn't know. This is really wild and incredible at the same time. Google Gemini AI is being used in the World Series. And to talk about this, real innovation. We have Anil Jain, who is with Google Cloud, has been working on this project. Anil, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let's talk about this. What exactly is happening that Google Gemini AI is being used during the World Series?
Oh, it's actually fascinating. You know, Major League Baseball, and for all the baseball fans out there of this great American pastime, they know that data and statistics about baseball are, you know, an equally important part of the game as watching the sport itself. And what's happening right now is our friends at Fox Sports, the anchors that actually produce the broadcast, spend hours with their teams, their production teams, doing a lot of research, preparing interesting stats, and thinking about what could possibly happen so that while the game is happening, they can tell great, rich stories. Now they don't need to spend hours doing this. They can actually use Fox Foresight, which is something Fox Sports built on top of Google Cloud's AI platform and uses Gemini to actually get a bunch of data on even the smallest details of all the games that have happened before. It's trained on many seasons of MLB games and World Series performances, so that the anchors can actually pull a statistic that they've just thought of and say, you know, how many left-handed batters have done the following, for example, and they can pull that up in seconds and then use that as they're telling the story and entertaining all of the fans that are watching the game.
So, Anil, let me make sure I'm understanding this, and hopefully I have this right, or you could walk me through it. So are
Sure.
they using this like in real time? Like how I'm talking to you, they're talking out and they're asking the question and it pops up on a screen? Or is this a situation where maybe your co-anchor is talking and you have that question, you type it in real quick and you get the answer? How does it go from conceptualized in your mind to asking, you know, AI to then making it onto live TV?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it any of those ways, but I think probably most likely what's happening is when they know the lineup, they know what's happening, or they watched a play, and they or their production team is asking the question or engaging with Fox Foresight, built on Google Cloud's Vertex AI, and getting the information back. And they probably want to do that just so they can then read it and be able to turn around and talk about it, as opposed to like read it off a screen. So it's still within seconds. But you know, they're phenomenal anchors and they do a great job. And so, you know, part of it is the art of telling the story, but now it's, you know, rich with all the data that they're getting real time from Gemini.
So I have to ask, I would think that there had to be someone that it was their job to put in some of these statistics, some of the history, some of the player stats, right? In order for that to then be able to be all collected together to give, you know, the commentator something. Is that right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally you have teams working on this and preparing, but the thing to think about is that during the actual game, when something amazing happens, it goes for 18 innings, or there's some incredible play or situation that arises, to be able to find information pertaining to what story you want to tell or what you want to understand about that specific moment, you know, is not something you can prepare in advance. You have to do that on the spot. And so you were often reliant on just the, you know, the historical knowledge that these enthusiasts and these anchors had in their brains, right, from all the time that they've been involved in the game. Now they can actually enhance that because they or their teams sitting there live can actually pull this information right to their fingertips.
You know, Anil, when we talk about AI, a lot of people get nervous, right? They're like, oh,
Sure.
It's going to put me out of a job. In your opinion, and based on what you've seen specifically within this project, how do you feel like it makes people's jobs better? It makes you better when you're able to deliver, you know, precise information that maybe, looking 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, we wouldn't have had this type of technology available to us?
Yeah, Tia, I think that's a great question. I think it's a really important one. Look, I think that when we think about AI and all the capabilities that it brings to bear, it's democratizing the power of so much research and analytics and insights, and bringing it to everybody so that they can actually do a better job of telling their stories or expand the canvas of creativity, if you will. And one of my good friends is actually an executive vice president at Fox Sports, and we worked on many things over the years together, especially with the introduction of AI into how Fox Sports is leveraging technology to do a better job. And when asked the question about how do you assess the value and the impact, he says, the real question is, what value can you put on making your product, in this case a sports broadcast, better, right? And so I think it comes down to the individual, whether they're an editor or producer, they're involved in some other part of producing a sports broadcast. The reality is it gives them a lot more richness to kind of the set of tools that they have to not spend hours and hours in kind of tedious research trying to find information that may not be available to them, but they can really focus a lot more on the creativity of, hey, this is really exciting. How do I enhance what just happened with more information or more details, or even more, video or imagery that would actually make the audience experience better? And I think that is rewarding not only for the audience who, the fans who are watching the game and listening to the broadcast, but also the people doing the work, because they are able to spend their energy and their time on the things that are more exciting and more fulfilling to them as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Because I can't tell you, especially I'm not on the sports side, but when it comes to political season, you're delving into all of these facts about things that, you got to dig in the crates on some of this stuff. And do some real research, when you're right, you could have been spending your time maybe doing something else. I do have a question for you. So I know on a small scale, it is being tested about AI calling balls and strikes, and I wanted to get your opinion on that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And every sports league out there, much like any other industry, is going to have to make sure they put the right, quality factors in place, and they'll have to evaluate what's right for them. I will say this, that Major League Baseball has been at the forefront of innovation and using video and data capture and AI in their games for years to be able to actually get lots of information from multiple cameras around every stadium and be able to process that for a variety of things. So they're not strangers to this. I think the question now is one more of kind of policy, right? And that is, how are you using AI, and what will you allow AI to be used for? And I imagine that many things like this, like the example you're providing, is one where it'll be AI augmenting what human referees and assessments are done, as opposed to replacing humans, right? And so it'll be like the human referee and the AI tool set working together to have the better outcome of more accurate balls and strikes.
I know we're talking about the MLB today, but has there been any conversation about, other sports, NBA, NFL, soccer, heck, swimming, for crying out loud? Has there been any conversations about AI being used in those sports, or is it already happening and we're just not maybe as publicly aware of it?
Yeah, I think all major sports are actively looking at, they've been, very technology forward, right? I mean, if you think about what we're doing right now, we're using digital technology and video to provide this interview and this content in a streaming fashion, right? All of this is kind of predicated on the same infrastructure and cloud and networking technology, which actually is enhanced by AI behind the scenes. And every sports league, and I've been in many conversations myself, and my team has been with many leagues, and not just in the US, but globally, have been looking at enhancing the way they provide delightful audience experiences, how they tell the stories, how they broadcast, how they provide content after the games are done. And I think you'll see more and more, including in the Olympics coming up.
All right, it's going to be very interesting. Who knows? Maybe next there will be a Tia Ewing version of AI that will be sitting here doing this show. Anil Jain, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insight on all of this.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Hopefully we'll have you coming back on soon talking about some other innovation. We appreciate it. Okay, coming up, we're going to transition a little bit. We've been talking about the MLB in a positive light, but there is no doubt about it. I'm sure many of you saw as it made headlines to kick off this week about the gambling situation with the NBA, some NBA players being involved, even coaches being involved in this. We're going to talk to an expert on this, delve into the topics. There's been speculation that other player names will come up as this investigation continues. We'll have much more on that on the other side of this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. Maybe you're like me. You've been following the story of these NBA former players, one active player that came out in this huge federal investigation. And in fact, not too long ago, this made headlines that the NBA actually issued an urgent memo in the wake of the gambling scandal, basically reviewing and talking with players, letting them know about sports betting policies to make sure that they stay protected, and they also want fans to stay protected as well. We've heard of a few names that have come out of this, but could there be more? That is the question that I think all fans have been asking. We want to bring in Scott Bernstein to talk about this. We know that he is based in Detroit, but he's on the board for the Mob Museum in Las Vegas and also got a law degree from the University of Chicago. And Scott, to my understanding, I know you believe that this scandal will go down as history and in history as one of the biggest sports betting scandals that we've seen. Why do you believe that? And I think a lot of people are speculating more names will come out of this. What do you make of that as well?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I have no doubt that this will be the biggest sports betting scandal in American history when it's all said and done. The scope and scale of this has never been seen before. It's stretched from New York to LA for a 2 to 3 year period, almost nightly point spread manipulations between the NBA and Division I college basketball. This is the very tip of the iceberg, and we're going to be seeing a lot more names, a lot more games, a lot more institutions, because the NCAA is going to get brought into this over the next couple months, year. I don't think that this is anywhere close to being over. And just to give a timeline example, the first case in this really was from the summer of 24. So it's been about 16 months since the first case to the second case. So if it's another 16 months, that brings us, into 2027 maybe. So that's how complex and layered this thing is. And it's been two current NBA players, or one former NBA player that's now, I think, doing a jail stint, in Jonte Porter, who played for Toronto. And now Terry Rozier from the Miami Heat is another name that's a current NBA player that's being brought in. And then two coaches so far, Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones.
I took some time, Scott, when all of this happened. I wanted to see what were the feds alleging here, who was involved, who were the players. And my first thought was, how did these, former players and current player, how did they get involved with these mob families? These are names that, when you look into it, these are serious mob families. I think I counted 4 families in total. One I remember specifically being the Gambino family. What can you tell us about the mob ties here, and how someone would get tangled up in this? To my knowledge, I don't hang out with mobsters. So how would they even be able to make those connections? Is this a situation where maybe you have a gambling problem? You come across this family and you owe them a debt, so you work for them. Like, how does that work?
Well, there were 2 parts of this conspiracy that we know about right now based on the case that was filed last Thursday, Operation Royal Flush. And there's a lot of moving pieces here, but I'll try to I'll simplify it. But what was being alleged in the indictment was that some of this started with fixed poker games that certain current and former pro athletes were participating in. The allegation is that Chauncey Billups, the Hall of Fame point guard, who's now the head, or was, or currently is, the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, was drawing players, friends, contemporaries into these games that were fixed. The mob was fixing these games, these poker games. And then because these players were getting into fixed poker games, they would accrue a debt. And these were high roller games. So, sometimes millions of dollars were exchanging hands in a night of high-end poker. And then in order to make good on the debt, the mobsters that were behind Chauncey Billups and the guys that were drawing these players in would then lean on them and leverage the debt into, why don't you manipulate a point spread or a prop bet for us to point shade with and make money on. The other aspect of this was, the mastermind of this whole thing allegedly is a guy named Shane Hennon. He comes from Pittsburgh. He was arrested last winter and is cooperating. He had a history of staging AAU basketball events, summer youth basketball events, summer pro-am leagues, going back 20 years, where he was allegedly or potentially washing illegal proceeds through these events. And he was cultivating relationships with future NBA players, future college players from the time they were 12, 13 years old. And then when this conspiracy started, he went back and tapped a lot of these guys that he knew from helping their AAU basketball teams.
So I want to make sure I followed you there. There was a lot of good information there. So are you saying that some of these current player, former players, they were already doing gambling? They were already gambling on a regular basis, got caught up with the mob in some ways, and then were kind of forced to help them carry out these crimes. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's some of the allegations, yes, that they would be corralled into these fixed poker games where they were going to lose no matter what because the game was fixed. And from those fixes, they would accrue a debt. And the mob, who was the financiers of this game, of these poker games, as well as the financiers of these point shaves, would then pressure the players that were in debt to make good on the debt by manipulating a point spread or a prop bet.
Why is it that you believe, I've seen, a lot of chatter online about this too, that it is believed that it's possible that other NBA coaches could be involved in this and other NBA players, maybe some former, maybe some current. Why do you believe other names, big names that we've heard before, will come out of this?
Because right now we've only heard the names of two players that were playing in the NBA when this happened. Jonte Porter, who's pled guilty, and I believe is either in the middle of doing a jail sentence or already did a jail sentence. And then Terry Rozier, who's denying all the allegations, but is a current NBA player with the Miami Heat. Those are the only two names that you've heard so far. And like I said earlier in this interview, this was something that was going on for over 2 years on a practically a nightly basis, and from coast to coast, from New York to LA and everywhere in between, and involving the NBA and Division I college basketball. So you just do the math. That's a lot more than two players.
Definitely a lot more. When I was looking at some of the court documents, there were pictures of certain things, like, for example, that table that had X-ray technology where the cards would be revealed. That was found on an iCloud account of someone. You mentioned Mr. Hennon there, who was a part of this. These people weren't in hiding. His Instagram page was open the day, it probably still is, I haven't checked, but it was open the day, still open, still posting about gambling, etc. The day when all of this came down. These people haven't been in hiding. Are you surprised by that? And typically when the mob is involved like this, a lot of the people that were mentioned in those court filings, they've had previous cases, that they've been charged for, indicted for, and they were still out. Who, in this case, the mafia sounds like they're kind of prepared for this.
Well, this is the bread and butter of the mafia. They, find a mark that they can cut into, and then they leverage, whatever exposure they can put on the player. When it comes to Shane Hennon, who, from what I'm understanding and from my reporting, was the wheel that this all spun from, and the Gambinos cultivated a relationship with Hennon out of Pittsburgh, and then from that is where they brought in the other crime families. And like you said, there was 4 of the 5 New York crime families involved: the Gambinos, the Lucchese's, the Bonanos, and the Genovese. I'm a little bit surprised that some of this was so out in the open. And when I say this, a simple Google search could have told you that Shane Hennon had allegations of allegations that he had cooperated in a past drug case. A simple Google search would have told you that. And it doesn't seem like any of the NBA or college players that were involved in this, or any of the mobsters that were involved in this, did any due diligence on the person that was kind of at the tip of the spear here, allegedly had a history of cooperating. So it shouldn't be shocking to people that the second that Mr. Hennon got jammed up and got pulled off a plane by the FBI on his way out of the country last January, he immediately, according to my sources, opened up and started helping them build a case. And what we see now is the first shoe to drop in this case, that the mastermind of the conspiracy is helping the feds build the case. So it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Do you think this is a situation where if you're roped and tied into, this is different families, right? But all mob ties there, that your life is on the line if you don't go with what they say?
I think that's a threat that they'll use, but in reality, the mafia in the 2020s doesn't kill people, which is why they've been able to kind of go back into the shadows over the last quarter century. There was for all intents and purposes, there was a conscious decision made by the mafia in America that they were going to dial back the violence. And because of that, because of the federal government reprioritizing and putting more emphasis on, after 9/11, foreign terrorism, in the last 10 years, 15 years, domestic terrorism, the mafia has not been top of mind. And although there are guys in the mafia that have killed people, they don't actively put murder contracts on people's heads in this day and age. But the threat and the history, the legacy, definitely helps, achieve their agenda.
I know you mentioned there, and after this, I am going to let you go. But you mentioned there, when we talk about investigations and what has happened, looking at our country from a legal perspective over the last few years, you said, the mafia may not be top of mind. Why do you think now? Why go after these groups of people now? The families, the players. Why stop it now?
Why? Because this is, like I said, this is going to end up being the biggest sports betting scandal we've ever seen. And the scope and scale of this thing is mind-numbing. And when people get the full story here and consume the entire conspiracy, they're going to be astounded at how sprawling this was. So, and then it involves professional sports and some of these betting apps that in the league's relationship with the gambling companies. There's so much meat on this bone. You couldn't ignore it. It would be impossible to ignore it.
I had a follow-up question for you, but it escapes my mind now. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my mind around why a player would risk everything that they've amassed, especially someone like, Chauncey Billups.
Like Terry Rozier had a $100 million contract. He's making $25 million a year. I mean, I think the best way to break it down is greed, temptation, and access. And a lot of guys can play mental gymnastics with these prop bets. And for your audience that aren't bettors, a prop bet is you're not betting on the final score of the game. You're betting on a certain player's rebounds. So they'll set a number. For instance, Terry Rozier, that one of the games that he's alleged to have manipulated the point spread in, he had an over-under that he was going to get 8 rebounds. And at the halftime, he had 6 rebounds. He just pulled himself out of the game in the second half, so he couldn't get those other 2 rebounds. They can convince themselves that it's really not that big of a deal because they're not affecting the win or the loss.
Yeah, but what's crazy about that is when you look at how much money they made from their contracts, these type of bets were like pennies on the dollar. I do have a follow-up. This was the question I was going to ask you. I read in one case, one of these rigged games, poker games specifically, that they had essentially swindled someone out of, I think it was like $1.3 million. Any idea who some of these people that were not in on it, who they were? Who are they?
High rollers, guys that are looking for action, professional poker players, professional gamblers, and just, guys with a lot of money that like the action, that are attracted to these type of games, that would normally maybe go to a casino, but for whatever reason they go to, there's a certain sex appeal and cachet to going to gamble with, pro athletes. And even if that the mob's involved, there's a temptation factor there to just, sit there and be able to tell a story about hanging out with the mob without thinking that they're robbing you. Yeah.
I do want to ask you a follow-up really quickly, and then I promise after this I'll let you go. I had heard some intel that there was a coach, a Midwest coach on the Midwest at one point, who was in on this. Name has not been mentioned, but a popular player decided to leave that team because of it. Have you heard anything about that as well?
I've heard some big names, again, in both the NBA and in college basketball. I think this is going to be bigger in the college basketball space than it is in the NBA, in the sense of how many people were point spread manipulating. And we'll know more as the months and go forward and more cases drop within this Operation Royal Flush. But you're going to have some big names, some big college basketball programs, more NBA teams, more players. Pablo Torre just was able to break the news of Antonio Gates, the Hall of Fame NFL player, being involved in hosting one of these games. So not just the NBA, you also have now a former NFL player that's been brought into it, according to Pablo's reporting. This is going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
And I think anyone that was playing college sports or currently playing should be definitely concerned. You have been a wealth of knowledge, and we definitely appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Go ahead.
Real quickly, just plug Original Gangsters podcast, anywhere you consume your podcast, and The Gangster Report, which is my web magazine, www.gangsterreport.com. Those are the two places that you can consume my reporting.
All right, and I'm sure you will continue reporting on this very topic. Scott Bernstein, thank you so much for your time today. We definitely appreciate you. All right, well, we have a lot more coming up here. We have about a little less, almost 30 minutes, right, left of content here. We're going to talk a little bit more with Caitlin Piper. She's actually the PR director for Cinemark. They're getting the 70 millimeter IMAX. We're going to talk about that and what it means for moviegoers right after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Chicago Live. So this is really interesting, exciting, all the things. So IMAX and Cinemark, they strike an agreement for IMAX with Laser and IMAX 70 millimeter film systems across 17 locations. And that means, guess what? It is coming to a suburb right here in Chicagoland. We'll get to that. But first, I want to bring in Caitlin Piper, who is the PR director for Cinemark. Thank you so much for your time today. Tell us why, combining this with this new technology is so important.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, we love movies at Cinemark. And we think that anytime you go to the movie theater, it should be absolutely the best, most immersive experience possible. And so we believe all of our auditoriums really offer that premium, immersive escape from reality. But what's really exciting about expanding our IMAX offering at our Severn Bridges location is that it offers that 70 millimeter film play. So you have seen perhaps lately a lot of filmmakers really talking about how much they want their films to be seen the way they were meant to be seen. And especially most recently, Ryan Coogler, and then also, of course, Christopher Nolan is a huge advocate for 70 millimeter, showing films actually on film. And we are talking actual rolls of film. These rolls sometimes are miles long that run through these films, and you get to see just a little bit crisper picture, but also you get the nostalgia of watching a movie unfold with actual film.
So I've had the pleasure of going to that location, the Severn Bridges location, right off of Route 53 there, and I've seen plenty of movies. If I go into a theater now and I go see the 70 millimeter film, the projector they're playing, what will be the difference for someone that has never experienced this before?
Sure. So first and foremost, the most important thing to note is that not every movie is offered on 70 millimeter film because there is a huge logistical undertaking. But the big one everyone's talking about right now, which you'll believe it, is a year from now, Christopher Nolan's upcoming The Odyssey epic film. So that will also be displayed on 70 millimeter, coming off of him showing Oppenheimer, and then of course earlier this year, Sinners from Ryan Coogler. So the difference here is that you are actually getting to see true camera film. So the average everyday moviegoer may not catch the difference in the feel because of course every movie-going experience at a movie theater is big and loud and crisp and immersive. But that film, the shutter rate and the exchange rate as the scenes change is a little bit different. You can kind of actually, if you're sitting toward the back, hear the film whirl on the projector. And it gives you just a completely up-leveled experience for people who are real cinephiles and really, really love that unique opportunity. And I will say, if this is interesting you at all, you better look out for when tickets go on sale because historically we sell out of these 70 millimeter showings because we have one of those theaters in Dallas. We sell out of these showings in minutes. Fans who love this format go crazy over it and absolutely make sure they have a seat in that auditorium.
Let's talk about from a perspective of training, because that's the first thing I think of, whereas I've never worked at a movie theater, so let me confess that. Sure. But in my mind, I think about how we have advanced when we talk about technology, that in some cases, at least this is how I envision it, Caitlin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Someone is back there, they hit a button, the actual previews play, and the movie goes. What kind of training goes into now teaching someone that may be 25, they've never really, experienced 70 millimeter film. Even myself, I haven't, even at my age, but going through the training for them to be able to do this. Is there training that has happened at these locations now as a result of this?
Sure. Well, you are absolutely right. The whole movie going technology is so automated at this point, and we at Cinemark are really, really proud with our technology team. We think they're the best in the business. Of course we do. But what we will say is that you're absolutely right. Playing a 70 millimeter film is completely different than your standard just digital or laser projector that you would see on any given day at a Cinemark movie theater. So you're right. It is incredibly automated on a day-to-day basis, but with the 70 millimeter, it is completely different. Now, I will say, we maintain those projectors. We keep them ready, up and running, ready to go for these 70 millimeter film showcases. But IMAX, of course, will also send in a projectionist for these. So it's a real team effort with our friends at IMAX. We, of course, at Cinemark know how to manage the technology and do it perfectly well, keep it up and running. And then IMAX is also there as support because obviously when you're dealing with miles of film, you want someone there to make sure there's quality check and make sure everything goes off without a hitch.
How many miles are we talking about for some of these films? That's a rhetorical question, but in all seriousness, you mentioned the Dallas theater there. They do this and tickets sell out in minutes. Is there a different price point from going to see, a traditional film that's not on 70 millimeter versus the films that are shown on 70 millimeter film?
Sure. So prices vary based on a lot of different factors, which can include anything from the market that the theater is in, the time of day you're going to see a show, the day of the week you're going to see a show, and then yes, we do consider IMAX a premium upgrade opportunity. Now it's not going to break the bank, and there are still additional ways to secure savings at Cinemark by joining our loyalty programs, like our free rewards program, Cinemark Movie Rewards, or being a monthly member of Cinemark Movie Club, which gets you great discounts. But yes, we do consider this an upgrade. And again, it won't break the bank or really hurt the wallet, but you are getting a very premium experience when you go into this IMAX 70mm auditorium.
Your background is making me fiend for some popcorn with butter. Caitlin Piper, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you coming on the show.
Of course, thrilled to be here. See you at the movies.
Yep, we'll see you at the movies. I love when it ends like that. All right. Well, this show is going to continue on. We're going to continue right after this break. We're going to talk to former FBI agent Ross Rice about what we learned in court today regarding Greg Bavino. We'll have that for you. Stay with us right after this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. At the top of the show, if you didn't miss it, we talked about the U.S. Border Patrol Chief Greg Bavino having to testify before a judge right in federal court today, Judge Sarah Ellis, and she then made sure to let Bavino know that Monday through Friday that he has to check in with her in terms of video, what has transpired on the streets of Chicago, and really just doing checks and balances of the activity that we have seen across the Chicagoland area. I want to bring in former FBI agent Ross Rice to really break some of this down. Ross, thank you so much for your time today.
Hi, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You know, I was looking at some of the conditions, essentially, that Judge Ellis put on Bavino, and I compared it to a form of almost like what we see with electronic monitoring, that you have to come in, you kind of got to tell us what you're doing, explain what's going on, and is this considered to be unprecedented for a federal official to be ordered to be in contact with a judge on a daily basis like this?
I can't think of another situation where this has taken place, but we have a very unique circumstances here. The hearing today was to give the judge an opportunity to monitor and get an update on if a temporary restraining order she had issued several weeks ago affecting ICE and Customs and Border Patrol was being followed and if it was being effective. And that's why she had Mr. Bovino come in and testify and provide an update on behalf of the immigration enforcement actions that are going on in Chicago.
So I want to kind of point out for people exactly what the judge is requesting of Bovino here. She wants to see him at 6 o'clock in the evening every weekday in person for a report on how the day went until that TRO expires. On Mondays, Bovino will give her a report on how the weekend went. What kind of tone do you think this sets for the federal government and any type of agency that is on the ground in communities like this looking forward?
Well, it's certainly going to tell agents from ICE, Customs, Border Patrol, other federal agencies that are involved in immigration enforcement that the judge's temporary restraining order and the restrictions that she put in place a few weeks ago are being monitored and being followed. And that's the key point here. The reason she's having Director Bovino come in person is to give her a daily update. Apparently, she's not comfortable with the reports that she's been getting either from the plaintiffs in this suit or that she's seen in the media herself. And obviously, there's two sides to every story. She just wants to get the Customs and Border Patrol officials to say, this is what they're doing, these are the problems they're encountering, and this is how we're trying to follow and implement the guidelines and restrictions in your temporary restraining order.
We covered a story here, Ross, involving one of the ICE agents on the ground, and I believe it was Garfield Park. There was a shooting there. A woman was shot 5 times when it was the federal document was put out to the media about what was going to transpire in court. There were only 3 out of the 5 agents that were present that had on body cameras. And in this case, specifically today, the judge directed agents to currently make sure they're equipped and trained with body-worn cameras. They must activate them during enforcement operations. My question to you is, how important are body-worn cameras from an investigative and accountability standpoint, looking at the fact that in some cases we know things have happened with ICE agents, Border Patrol agents on the ground, and there were no cameras present to really give their narrative of what happened, or even some of what we've heard from residents on the streets?
Sure. I think from a professional standpoint, body cameras are one of the greatest assets for law enforcement because if they're utilized, if they're activated during an enforcement operation or with local police departments, if they're doing a traffic stop or an arrest of something under their jurisdiction, it really removes any doubt about what happened and when and why. Now, the one drawback to body cameras is you're getting the point of view from the officer himself. You're not going to get a panoramic view like you would from a poll camera or from a private citizen that may be shooting video on their cell phone from 50 or 100 feet away. It's a much more specific viewpoint that you're getting, and it could miss crucial points. Now, one of the incidents that the judge brought up today was, I believe, over the weekend during an enforcement action in Little Village, Director Bovino was seen throwing a tear gas canister, and he claimed that he had been struck in the head with a rock right before that. And that's what precipitated his use of the tear gas. Well, he didn't have a body camera on, and none of the body cameras that the other officers had apparently caught the person throwing this rock. Now, we have to take him at his word that that's what happened. But if he had been wearing a body camera, there's a good chance that incident might have been captured.
I know the judge mentioned wanting to see body camera footage or having it to her dating back through sometime in September.
Right.
When a court orders a law enforcement agency to then produce, use of force reports, body camera footage, any other internal documentation of the sorts, what challenges can arise in gathering and maybe reviewing and producing that material to get it to the judge?
Well, I'm sure the judge wants it in a timely manner. That's why she's directing the Director Bavino to be meeting with her face to face every day at 6 o'clock. The issue is, at least in the Chicago area, you have enforcement operations taking place at multiple venues in the city, in the suburbs. Different teams are out trying to locate and apprehend illegal immigrants. You may not get all that information in a timely manner. And the other issue with body cameras that a lot of people don't realize, the cameras are very inexpensive. Learning to use them is not that difficult either. Obviously, there's a learning curve that goes along with the training. The issue is the storage of the video. How long are you going to be able to store it? How long do you have to store it? And that's what has precluded a lot of local law enforcement agencies in the Chicago area from fully implementing body cameras, is because of the storage capacity that's needed for all the film that's shot every day.
You know, one of the topics that came up in court today was the words imminent threat. The plaintiffs allege here that agents targeted protesters, journalists, and bystanders who posed no imminent threat. How does the law define imminent threat in this context, and should officers distinguish between enforcement action and then protected First Amendment activity, especially when we talk about on a federal level?
Well, that really is the crux of the whole court hearing today, and the temporary restraining order is the judge is trying to strike a balance, I believe, between private citizens' First Amendment right to assemble peaceably and to protest the actions of the government with the safety issues that the agents making the enforcement operations are encountering. And that becomes, imminent threat becomes a very subjective standpoint. What might be an imminent threat to me might not be an imminent threat to you, or vice versa. So the judge is trying to establish an equilibrium point here where everybody is operating under the same guidelines and the same rules. It's going to be very difficult to enforce this going forward. What someone feels might be their First Amendment right to protest is a threat to the agents and the officers. If their vehicle is being surrounded, if they're being pelted with stones or rocks or other debris, and you get emotions involved in these situations. People are fearing for their safety. The agents are fearing not only for their own safety, but the people that they've taken into custody. We saw what happened in Texas a few weeks ago when a sniper opened up on customs and immigration officials at a staging area, and I believe 2 detainees were the ones that were shot and killed. So it's a very volatile and very difficult situation.
You know, one of the issues that comes up all the time, even when you look at videos that people post online, oftentimes they're asking the agents to show your face, identify yourself. There's no identification oftentimes, but now this judge is saying that people on the ground must identify themselves. What do you make of that? Making sure that these agents, you know, have visible identification to where people on the streets that may encounter them know that they're talking to. Maybe it doesn't have your full name because of safety, but maybe it says, you know, T. Ewing or Ewing. I'm using myself as an example
Sure.
here, as some type of identifying factor. What do you make of that?
Well, that's completely understandable, Tia. And to be quite frank with you, all of the videos that I've seen of ICE enforcement operations, the officers that were filmed had some type of apparel on them that was identifying them as federal agents or immigration officers. So I don't know how many situations there have been, if any, where someone was engaged in enforcement operations and they had no identification on whatsoever. Going beyond that, I think that's really what the judge is looking for here, is making sure that the public knows that these are legitimate sworn law enforcement officers conducting an enforcement operation, as opposed to street criminals impersonating agents for more nefarious purposes.
I think in some cases, I'm just going back through what transpired in court. There were some instances where people would cover up, I guess, their identification, and the judge wanted to make it clear that federal agents should wear visible identification, period. And I think there was some back and forth on exactly what that means, but that's what was brought up in the courtroom today. Ross Rice, it is always a pleasure. We appreciate you every time you lend your expertise. You have an insight that, we don't have and that we often need to hear. So thank you so much for joining us here on Chicago Live on this Tuesday edition of Chicago Live.
You're quite welcome, Tia.
All right, we'll see you soon. Okay, coming up, we're going to talk about Hurricane Melissa, a very big deal looking at what's going on right now, especially in Jamaica. A lot of people bracing themselves for this. We're going to have Chief Meteorologist Emily Walls here with me to talk all about it. We'll see you on the other side of this break. Welcome back to Chicago Live. As we get closer to wrapping up the show, we want to talk about Hurricane Melissa that has really impacted Jamaica. It's already made landfall.
Yes, so it made landfall a few hours ago near New Hope, Jamaica. So that's on the southwestern side. And this thing has been a beast. And what's really been interesting to watch with Melissa is how quickly it was able to strengthen. So a few days ago, we were starting to track this thing moving throughout the Caribbean, and it almost kind of went in loops, and it didn't really move all that much. It was almost stagnant. But then it was centered over the sea surface temperatures that are about 2 to 2.5 degrees warmer than average. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but that is an enormous amount of fuel that these storms can use. So this made landfall as a Category 5 storm. We had sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. So this is going into the record books as one of the strongest hurricanes to ever make landfall in the Atlantic Basin. I believe it's tied for number 3. And here's where it stands right now. So you'll notice here on this loop, a few hours ago, you can see a really perfect eye wall. Do you see it making landfall on the southwestern side? So now we're starting to see the eye collapsing on itself. So that's typically a sign of weakening. And if you take a look at the left side of your screen here, you can see that the maximum sustained winds are now at 160 miles per hour. So that's still really, really high, but it is beginning to weaken. But we're not done moving through Jamaica just yet. It's about halfway through. So that eye wall is going to start to move through the northwestern portion of the island very shortly here in the next hour or so.
I told you I looked at someone's video. They were in Jamaica. They were at a resort in Ochos Rios. They were evacuating. When we talk about 160 mile per hour winds, are we talking about the strength that can knock down a resort? There's a lot of resorts, a lot of tourism in Jamaica.
Absolutely. So if you think about it in terms of you know, how strong is 160 miles per hour, okay? So let's take it all the way back to a few hours ago when this thing was making landfall, 185 miles per hour.
Wow.
That's equivalent to an EF4 tornado. So when you think about that, and tornadoes are much smaller than a hurricane, right? But the strongest part of the winds encircle just that eye wall right there. But regardless, an eye wall of a storm like this is way larger than a tornado. So you have to think about just the expansiveness of these winds that are moving through. Yes, we're down to about 160 miles per hour, but that still puts this as a Category 5 storm. So Category 5 begins at 157 miles per hour. So we're kind of a lower end Cat 5 at this point. And everybody, of course, has been talking about Jamaica because that's who's currently being impacted. But next up is Cuba. Cuba's going to be hit later on tonight, right around midnight Eastern time or so, is likely when we're going to see this approaching the Cuban coast, likely still as a Category 4 storm. And then after Cuba, this is headed toward the Bahamas, likely as either a Category 3, maybe still a lower end Category 4. So it's going to take a while for this to begin to lose some steam. Now, we have seen some weakening because the terrain of Jamaica is very mountainous in some portions. So we have seen some weakening just because of that land interaction. But regardless, again, still a Cat 5. It's still moving to the north-northeast at about 8 miles per hour, which is very slow forward momentum. This is a very slow moving storm.
It's crazy because for a while there it was quiet in terms of hurricane season, and then this seems to came out of the blue.
You know, things have been, we've been very lucky this hurricane season so far, I will say. So this is actually our third Category 5 storm. But the other two, they stayed out to sea. They didn't interact with land at that status, a Category 5. Unfortunately, you know, this was not the case for Jamaica. We're going to see just complete devastation in some portions of the island, unfortunately, because, you know, structures that we have and we build, even, you know.
Look at some of those there.
You know, it's not meant to sustain that type of wind, and that's sustained winds that we were talking about, but wind gusts were even higher actually at some of the elevations around 1,000 to 1,500 feet, which some of the elevations there are, we are seeing wind gusts as high as about 245 miles per hour. That's insane.
Well, we are definitely keeping our hearts and our prayers focused on Jamaica and also Cuba, it sounds like, too.
Yeah, Cuba's up next
Definitely going to be hit hard as well. Emily Walls will have much more on this and your local forecast on the 4 o'clock news. And of course, at 5 o'clock, you can tune in on Fox 32, Chicago.com on your TVs right as well, or of course on Fox Local. Emily, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course.
All right, so are we taking a break here, Jim, or are we going to keep rolling through? We're going to go to break. Okay, but after the break, we're going to talk about the rattiest city. And guess what? Chicago is not on the list this time around.
Good news.
Stay with us. We'll see you on the other side of this ratty, cheesy break. Okay, so LA has knocked Chicago out of the top spot for the first time in a decade for being the rattiest city in America. I want to bring in Ian Williams, entomologist with Orkin. What did LA do that we didn't do this time to make the #1 spot, Ian?
Well, I don't know that they did anything negative, really. They really just had more rats this year. And so, you know, it was a steep mountain to climb with Chicago having a decade on top. But still a lot of rats around the country, and LA took the cake this year.
Right, Chicago #2. What can we do to really deal with the rat problem, no matter if you live in Chicago or LA?
Yeah. When we think about rats, you know, they're really a human problem. They live and they feed on our garbage and our food sources. They live in and around our homes. And so it's always imperative to look to clean up garbage, keep garbage out of areas where rats can get to it, clean up pet food, and then really looking to seal up the structure to try and make sure that they don't have access to a home or a business, and focusing on that, you know, prevention, to try and make sure that they don't have food, they don't have easy resources and easy access into our structures. Doing those things alone go a long way to trying to control rodents. But when that doesn't work, you know, trapping and seeking professional assistance is always a great tool as well.
All right, and that's when you call up possibly Orkin. All right, Ian Williams, entomologist with Orkin. We appreciate you joining us for this short time on Chicago Live. Okay, that'll do it for today. We will see you on Hump Day. Have a
Thank you, Supervisor Fielder. I want to give great, huge, giant thanks to all the lawyers, paralegals, community organizers who are doing the work every day, day in, day out, to protect our commitment to sanctuary and to protect our vulnerable immigrant communities. Great to have Stacey Slaughter here. Mayor Lurie and his team did amazing work last week, and I know I breathed a huge sigh of relief when we learned that Border Patrol, followed by National Guard, Marines, and whoever else would not be arriving in San Francisco on Thursday. And for now, we have been granted an incredibly important reprieve. So congratulations and thank you for that. But as a number of my colleagues and the speakers here have pointed out, the status quo on Thursday was not a good one for San Francisco's immigrant communities or for our city. It was a status quo of terror and fear for too many people who, since January, have been living under this shadow, have seen our constitutional protections, our commitment to asylum thrown out, and have suffered mightily from that. I know Supervisor Fielder has been agitating for this moment for a long, long time, and thank you, Supervisor Fielder, for that. And our tight-fisted budget chair, Connie Chan, who is very, very worried, as I know we all are, about the city's fiscal future as we head into choppier and choppier waters, as we worry not just about what the federal shutdown means for our vulnerable communities, but attacks on Medicare and Medicaid and federal funding for so many things that are so important to San Franciscans. In that context, our budget chair has correctly, I think, been very focused on trying to make our dollars go as far as possible. And I want to thank her for figuring out how to get this supplemental done. So thank you, Supervisor Chan, and thank you to the co-sponsors. I think we're going to get a unanimous vote, and it's great to have the support of the mayor. And thank you all for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, President Mandelman. And I want to invite District 10 Supervisor Shimon Walton, who's been a huge ally and representing immigrant constituents. Always been a reliable voice. And without that, further ado, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to reiterate the fact that when we are under attack here in San Francisco, the only thing we know how to do is to fight. And one of those ways we have the ability to fight is with our legal system. And so making sure that we have the resources to have people represented is very important. You heard the data, you heard the stats of how many people are able to be taken care of if and when they have legal representation. So that's what this supplemental does. It gives us the ability to use one of the tools that helps us fight and combat the ignorance of this administration. And what is more exciting for me is the fact that we are unified here on this Board of Supervisors. We are unified here in this community. Everybody understands the importance of making sure that these resources are available. So look forward to seeing you all this afternoon at the meeting so that we can make this a reality for the people who need us the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Walton. I want to round us out in one last chant, if you will indulge me. When I say, aquí estamos, you say, no nos vamos. Y no nos vamos. Aquí estamos. Aquí estamos. Aquí estamos. Gracias a todos. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much to my colleagues.
All right, you're just listening in there to that here on Live and Now from Fox out of the Bay Area as they were talking about some of those immigration operations. We were talking with Anna Giarratelli from the D.C. Washington Examiner, talking about that shakeup, the shuffling of ICE enforcement directors, their leadership, as more Border Patrol officials will be put into those roles in cities like Denver, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Phoenix. All right, following it all here on Live Now from Fox, a live picture there, Kingston, Jamaica, I believe, as Hurricane Melissa slams into that island nation, bringing with it lots of rain and wind, upwards of 200 miles an hour in terms of gusts, sustained winds, 165, 175. As it moves over this island, certainly devastating, but power still looks like it's on at this point, which is a good sign. Coming up here in just a little bit, it was the marathon of Game 3, all 18 innings of it last night at Dodger Stadium, and they will have to return to the field one more time. A live look there as it will be Dodgers Blue Jays game number 4 with LA leading this series 2-1. That pivotal Game 3 came down to Freddie Freeman. Some more heroics from him in that bottom of the 18th inning. I'm Eddie Mac. We're back after. All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. It was about 3 hours ago or so that methodical monster of a storm, Hurricane Melissa, finally slamming into the coast there in Jamaica. A live look at our computer X-RAD monitor as it made landfall along the southwestern coast of Jamaica on Tuesday with dangerous wind speeds of 185 miles per hour. Life-threatening storm surge preparing to leave a wake of destruction across the island before focusing its ferocity on southeastern Cuba. It was a Category 5 cyclone slamming in near New Hope at 1 o'clock Eastern, turning slowly toward the island nation, killing at least 7 in the Caribbean along the way. Northern portions of the eye wall moving ashore earlier Tuesday morning. Landfall signifies the moment when the hurricane center crosses the shore onto land. For more on this, let's go on to Robert Ray with a glimpse of what was unfolding in Jamaica.